A couple of years ago, I talked about the touring car race driver series, mostly because I grew up with these as a V8 supercar fan at the time, helping shape my motorsport childhood, and was barely, if ever at all, talked about on YouTube in general, and I wanted to be the first. But when the next generation of consoles were arriving, Codemasters were planning ahead by designing a new game engine called Neon, which was first used for Colin McRae Rally Dirt in 2007. It introduced new graphical capabilities previous generations couldn't handle at once, and neither version felt neglected. Impressive considering how difficult it was to develop games for the PlayStation 3 back then. But Codemasters weren't done yet. For their follow-up of one of their other big franchises, they made some modifications to the Neon engine to allow night racing, a day and night cycle in real time, improved lighting and shade effects while maintaining a high volume of cars with highly detailed damage on the track at the same time. And though the renamed Ego engine would be modified each passing title, Codemasters are still using it in their video games today. You could say that it's what the Rage engine is to Rockstar basically. But they weren't just changing the graphics, they were also changing the direction of the touring car series, in which touring cars was taken out of the title completely to reduce attention on one vehicle type and to go for a grittier look to both appeal and make more accessible to a wider audience. I have to admit, it took me a long time for me to realize these three branches are connected. Race Driver Grid was released for the PC, Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 on June 2008, the Nintendo DS in November, and the arcade on November 2010. And Codemasters would continue under the Grid name to this day, with the most recent title releasing on October 2019, also called Grid. Seriously, why don't they just call it Grid 4? But anyway, we're looking at the 2008 title. For every racing game, there's always a key feature or selling point that makes us want to return to it. Forza Motorsport is about collecting cars. Gran Turismo is about the sheer level of content. Examples like that. The selling point of Race Driver Grid is about having your own racing team and trying to reach the top of the driver and team rankings, being the best on both ends. At the beginning of the career mode, or Grid world, you drive for other racing teams to earn prize money from winning races. It takes little gameplay chunks from other established races and touring car predecessors. Like the event selection, it's based off the first touring car race driver, where winning enough championships will unlock another branch of faster and more difficult ones. But like Forza Motorsport, they're categorized by continents, USA, Europe, and Japan, and winning enough of these races will unlock global events with the fastest cars in the game. The event variety is actually quite diverse in terms of the type of races to enter. Of course, you have the touring cars, supercars, open wheelers, but you also have Japanese downhill sprints that remind me of Forza Motorsport. The drift challenges are like Need for Speed, in which longer and consistent slides give you combo multipliers. The demolition derby races. Now I should hate these because it's impossible to anticipate oncoming vehicles since the track uses a figure 8 configuration. Selecting pro mode in the difficulty settings, which I'll get to, is a deal with the devil. But the sheer lunacy of it all more than makes up for it. And because it uses a seasonal format that Forza Motorsport 3 would eventually implement itself, every year you also have the opportunity to participate in the 24-hour Le Mans. Okay, while there is a day and night cycle in real time, time is sped up at around 15 minutes. It reminds me a bit of Test Drive Le Mans, and that's the way races are structured throughout the whole Grid world. Even the more elite level championships, what you get is quick action that keeps you on the edge. I don't think there was a non-endurance race that doesn't last more than 5 minutes. Just a few laps, no pitting in, and if you decide to switch off the game in the middle of a championship, you can return to where you left off. Handy because the number of circuit environments isn't as high as I was expecting. 13 to be precise. I mean, they're not bad circuits. Some don't even appear in other video games. The fictional street circuits are based off real-life street layouts like Project Gotham Racing. Yokohama is like driving through a stunt show. That's probably my favorite track. And as I explained just then, lots of different types. Downhill, demo derby, endurance, street, and there are a few variations, and some are raced in reverse. I've always wondered why they don't do this in real life. It would make racing more interesting. But that said, it's way off the mark compared to its predecessor, which had up to 40 circuits excluding variations. That's why it stood out to me. Why the reduced circuit count? Time constraints, lack of space, entering the next generation? Actually, more importantly, where are the Australian circuits? You had the V8 supercar license before. I mean, at least have Mount Panorama. The same can be said about the cars, which also lack variety. With most races, you only have 2 different cars to choose from, and by that I mean race modified like this, not this. Producer Clive Moody claims they did this because because they wanted each car to stand out more. That whenever you drive something else, it'll always feel different than the other. And you know what? It's a fair point. That is the case. And not only that, you have a higher volume of cars you want to drive, and you have to remember it's not a driving simulator, it's a racing simulator. It's more about team management and expanding it into something special. Instead of entering events with the car ready, you have to buy the cars which are also eligible for other events all over the world. Now I know all of you are thinking, well, that's exactly what you do in Gran Turismo and Forza Motorsport, but this is a series first for the touring car / grid series. Whatever race you enter, a car isn't too fast or slower than the other, and unlike its rivals, offline at least, you can auction them off eBay. Yes, that eBay. In-game of course, not for real. For a chance to make more money, as well as buy cars from the site. However, every single one I got off there, even with the highest quality possible, there'll be at least one thing wrong with it. So if you're good enough to win every race, just buy the cars brand new. Once you earn enough, you form your own motorsport team, with colors, patterns, and numbers to choose from. It's more diverse, yet simpler than I thought. Although you can't change body kits, performance upgrades, you can change the way it looks to make your team stand out from the crowd. And while it's no Need for Speed, Midnight Club, or Forza Motorsport, as you can see this is all you can do, I still enjoy this aspect because the vinyl presets with nearly 100 to choose from are creative and less time consuming to change around. Like it only takes around a minute to make a car look like it drove through a paint shop to being restored by a secret agency. And all the presets are purpose made and positioned around, so each one works on every car, including open wheelers. And to make the car looking professional no matter how eccentric it looks, if you win championships, you also earn sponsors that you apply as decals on your car. A major one pays double, they're non-contractual so you can change them anytime you want if you want to make the most money. But be careful because failing to meet their objectives means they don't pay you for that race. And this applies to your teammate, which is another new feature of the series. When you gain your first pro license in a region, you unlock the ability to have a teammate to partner with you and help win constructed championships for your team for extra money. That is, if any of them have ever driven a race car in their lives. Because every driver I hired in this playthrough, no matter how much money I spend, saying they're currently last place is par for the course really.
I'm sorry mate, I'm currently dead last.
So the only surefire way to advance regardless is to win every single race. But you know what? It's fun to do, so fair enough.
I think you won those races too easily. Up your difficulty level and up your reputation.
Yeah, probably because I made it too easy. Like Forza Motorsport, there are multiple difficulty options including AI, driving aids, and something that would be pretty revolutionary for the racing genre. At least more racing games started to use this feature. Not only can you restart a race, but rewind the last few seconds if you crashed or screwed up a corner. Similar to Prince of Persia. Kind of like Prince of Persia Sands of Time, and would be something future Codemasters franchises would utilize. This is either something you either really love or hate. Because some sponsor objectives include finishing the race without damage to your car, in fact too much damage can end the race indefinitely, this feature helps increase your chances of meeting it, but on the flip side, racing aficionados will consider that cheating. Fortunately, whatever you think, like all the other difficulty options, this feature can be turned off so you can't even restart a race throughout the entire championship, and whatever settings you have selected will also affect how much you earn. The developers added these options to appeal to a wider demographic and let them decide their own challenge because the career modes in the 6th gen touring car titles eventually became really hard over time, and you just had to face the music if you wanted to get anywhere. In Grid, because the presentation has a grittier approach, it looks like it's always sunset, the way the camera moves around while handling, and the shine and reflection effects look a bit exaggerated. Obviously graphically it looks really good, especially the damage models. I suppose after playing Need for Speed Undercover recently, this just feels like a breath of fresh air in comparison. Anyway, on top of that, when you have at least one opponent crashing or sliding out dramatically almost every race, the complete lack of qualifying sessions requiring you to overtake the whole pack in just a few laps, and an arcade version published by Sega, it's clear the game is leaning more towards the arcade route.
Keep it up, you're leading the race.
I have to admit, it doesn't set the best first impression control-wise. The drift events took almost a dozen attempts to comprehend. The interiors, while nicely detailed, it's not very visible outside, especially when opponents aren't afraid to get their cars dirty, but these are just very minor nitpicks. Eventually you'll have the right settings that fit with what you want out of a racing game, and you will, because in general, it controls superbly. Take this playthrough for example. Sometimes I would go into pro mode, but the only thing I left switched off the whole time is the brake assist. It makes the car control like a go-kart. I just like the combination of arcade and sim, my favorite kind of racing game. And that's how the driving mechanics work in Grid. It's as hard and crazy as you want it to be. The presentation makes it look like an arcade racer at its core, but if you choose to turn off all the driving aids, it's a very rewarding experience, even if you win just one race. It encourages you to lean on both sides throughout the career mode. It's impressive because summing up this game out loud, a lot of the features like using eBay to buy and sell cars, sponsors earning extra money, the difficulty options, it's all part of the gimmick, like a mini game in a video game. Grid is a slightly cartoony version of the touring car predecessors, with a few more features and graphical improvements to make up for the lack of overall content. Really the worst thing I can say about it. Now I haven't played any of the follow-ups yet, so there's a chance they've added more, but at the moment all I'm gonna say is, that's what happens when you don't have the license to official championships. Maybe they didn't want to be associated with gameplay that edged too closely to Burnout. But even then, you can make the argument that it puts quality over quantity, because right from the first race, it's a giant spectacle that plays well, the graphics are smooth, and despite the lack of overall content, sometimes time flies because races are quick and diverse. And because it's a racing game, it's cheap for what you get. That's what I like about racing games from around the 2000s. Each one has their own identity, but they're all cheap enough that you don't have to pick between the other, just respect them for what they are, and Grid is no exception. Do I favor it over something like Gran Turismo, Forza Motorsport, or even the predecessors? Probably not Touring Car Race Driver 3, but I think that has more to do with nostalgic memories than the V8 Supercar license. This one feels like it takes too many elements from other racing games, but at least it's the right things. And even a decade later, good lord, I can't believe it's that old now, it is still worth playing, no matter what system you buy it for.
What a win! Wait till you see the replay of that.